The Entity series is a set of extra deck monsters which are based on cosmic creatures from the extended Lovecraft mythos. It is important to note that no man is an island, and Lovecraft was a rather collaborative individual who developed and world-built alongside many others. Lovecraft even enjoyed others' contributions to his work, so feel free to contribute your own fanfiction. The Entity series may also be another contribution to his work, a reimagined and illustrated take on the originals. But how do they fit into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame? I would like to make an additional note that the Entity series is not really an archetype, as it lacks main deck monsters, and, save for a couple supporting spells and a trap, lacks main deck cards altogether. Now, let's return to the teaser at the tail end of the last video and talk about the forbidden trapezohedron. He felt entangled with something which was not in the stone, but which had looked through at him, something which would ceaselessly follow him with a cognition that was not physical sight. Originally a mysterious gem in a box, with the power to summon monsters, this card is remarkably faithful. There is artistic license taken to recolor the entirety of the gem red rather than black with a streak of red, and the mechanism for suspension of the gem is different. As far as impact in the deck, this card is great swarming for the Entity deck. The Forbidden Necronomicon of the Mad Arab Abdul al-Hazared. All too well did we trace the sinister lineaments described by the old Arab demonologist. Lineaments, he wrote, drawn from some obscure supernatural manifestation of the souls of those who vexed and gnawed the dead. The Necronomicon is probably the best-known apocrypha in the mythos, and it has been adopted in all sorts of different settings. When reading the Necronomicon, the effects can be severe and unpredictable. This card sends all of one type of extra deck card to the graveyard, which can function as disruption of extra deck strategies, an important setup tool, and even removal. But only 3 fully human souls since time began had ever crossed and recrossed the black and pious gulfs to other dreamlands. And of that 3, 2 had come back quite mad. The eponymous dreamlands were the setting for the novel The Dreamlands of Kadath, a mindscape filled with horror and wonder, an abyss with islands floating above it. The depiction of the art is very good at capturing the scale and isolation of a particular dreamland. The effects offer utility, each one enabling a different type of entity, as each entity gains new power in the other realms. Offering card draw, level modulation, and even a blind destruction effect, this card serves fusion, synchro, and XYZ monsters very well. Speaking of those monsters, let's start with fusion. The one whose splendor causes the destruction of worlds. The one with the gray eyes. Elder entity Nitiz is based on Nitiz Campbell, who was established in the House of the Worm by Gary Myers, and later expanded on in The Adoration of the Black Flame by Joseph H. Pulver. She is often depicted as Athena, the Greek goddess of strategic warfare. The destruction described in her epithet is reflected by the effect to destroy a card on the field when it is sent to the graveyard. Often this monster is sent directly from the extra deck to the graveyard to function as removal. But if it is summoned with a contact fusion between a Synchro and Xyz monster, then it has the effect to special summon a level 4 monster from your hand in order to extend your plays. Mechanically, this card is an accurate depiction, but artistically, it is unclear if she has gray eyes. And upon dolphins' backs was balanced a vast crenulate shell, wherein rode the grey and awful form of primal Nodens, lord of the great abyss. Similar to how Nitiz is based on the mythological deity of Athena, Nodens is based on the Celtic deity of the same name. Nodin is most strongly associated with the sea. Elder entity Norden fits the theme with a seahorse-drawn chariot and even sporting a trident, as Nodin is equated to the Roman god Neptune. The fusion materials are a generic combination of Synchros and Xyz monsters. Similar to Nitiz, there is the effect to special summon a level 4 or lower monster from the graveyard, an improvement over Natez as it offers a +1 in card advantage. As the card is a target for instant fusion, it is an incredible play initiator or extender, and as a result had to be banned for Synchro or XYZ spam. But it would also be quite effective in the Link era, as it offers 2 Link materials without using the normal summon. The Living Flame, the Burning One, the Inferno. Cthulhu is a fire attribute pyro monster, a very faithful representation as the entity appears as a living conflagration. It has a bounce effect to disrupt rank 4 strategies, which was actually very relevant at the time, with the rank 4 toolbox being at its strongest during the time of release. Then, if you use the monster as a fusion or Xyz material, you draw a card. This is a setup card to deal with your opponent's board, and draw a card after you use the card as a stepping stone to another extra deck monster. There's a whole secret cult of evil men. A man of your mystical erudition will understand me when I link them with Hastur and the Yellow Sign. Devoted to the promise of tracking them down and injuring them on behalf of monstrous powers from other dimensions. It is against these aggressors, not against normal humanity, that the drastic precautions of the Outer Ones are directed. Hastur is a creature of unspeakable horror, inhabiting many forms. In the Elder Entity Hastur card art, there is a depiction of the unspeakable as well as King in Yellow form. There is a sinister manipulative effect, similar to a combination of Fiendish Chain and Dark Necrofair when the monster is sent from the field to the graveyard. With Zephyros the Elite, you could bounce back the equip card to recycle the monster and steal an opponent's monster. Similar to Cthulhu, the monster is good for setting up and building advantage. The detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly gigantic, tenebrious ultimate gods. The blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles, whose soul is Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep bears the Hotep suffix describing royal Egyptian status, which is seen in its humanoid form in the self-titled short story. Outer Entity Nyarla instead resembles the crawling chaos, commanding a legion of hive-minded creatures. The shape-shifting ability is exemplified in the card's 2 effects. It can increment its level at the cost of discarding cards, as well as use its Xyz material to mimic the type and attribute of a monster in the graveyard. This is great utility, but more importantly, set up for the final boss monster. When learning stripped earth of her mantle of beauty, and poets sang no more, save for twisted phantoms seen with bleared and inward-looking eyes, when these things had come to pass, the childless hopes had gone away forever. Azathoth is the genesis and end of the universe. When it awakes from its slumber, all reality will cease to exist. Etymologically, the name is similar to the substance azoth from alchemy, a word constructed from the beginning and ending letters of several alphabets. Aleph, the first of the Phoenician alphabet. Zeta, the final character in Latin. Omega, the final character in Greek. Tau, the final character in Hebrew. Outer Entity Azathoth can be overlaid on top of Nyarla instead of using 3 level 5 monsters. It has a stun effect to prevent opponent's monster effects on the turn it is summoned, and an asymmetric board clear if you have a fusion, Xyz, and synchro monster as material. The card was a problem, as you could rank up into it during your opponent's turn, with the Phantom Light's rank up magic launch. This virtually skipped your opponent's turn, and since you could get the monster out on your first turn, was tantamount to summoning Imrakul, Aeon's Torn, on the first turn. That is terrifying, and definitely the right tone for the ultimate outer entity. The Entity series is a fairly faithful recreation of their inspiration, and the art is particularly lovely on some of the entities. Personally, I am particularly partial to Nyarlathotep's depiction in the art for Nyarla, but Hearthstone had an equally unnerving depiction of N'Zoth the Corruptor. Those alluring whispers to join the legions, so tempting, so seductive, so coercive. You will join us. Next time, we tackle Hearthstone's old gods.